Year-end company banquet. Paul showed up openly with his mistress. The woman was loud, chattering nonstop the entire time while leaning against Paul's chest. Sis can really hold her liquor. I wonder how many men she practiced with to get that good. Sis always stays this close to all these men? Sis has been married to Paul for so many years without having a child. Could it be she drank too much and messed around and ruined her body? A scream pierced through the entire private room. Her words shattered inside my wine bottle. I threw away the broken bottle in my hand, clapped my hands lightly, and smiled as I greeted everyone. Go on. Keep playing. Tonight, we're drinking till we drop. Chapter 1. The private room fell silent. Everyone's eyes landed on the shattered bottle in my hand, especially Paul's. The man had been lounging lazily on the sofa, watching coldly as his little mistress hurled insults at me. Now he was already holding the unconscious woman in his arms. The veins on his forehead bulged. He was clearly on the edge of fury. He really treasured that woman. After smashing her, I calmly sat back down as if nothing had happened, picked up a glass of wine, and took a sip. Paul, your taste this time isn't great. There was mockery in my eyes. You really have no standards. Isn't what she said the truth? Paul didn't answer me directly. He simply clenched his teeth and threw the question back at me. Just that one sentence felt like a scorpion's poison tail, stabbing my heart over and over. Even though our marriage had been a hollow shell for years, hearing that was enough to make a suffocating pain rise in my chest. Sure enough, only the person who knows you best knows exactly where to drive the knife for it to hurt most. Isn't it because you couldn't give me a child that I went looking elsewhere? Paul lowered his head and gently stroked the face of the woman in his arms. He lifted her carefully, as if she were something precious. Before leaving, he coldly tossed out a sentence. Elena, you'd better think carefully about how you're going to handle this. If anything happens to her, I won't let you off. I gulped down a mouthful of wine, glancing at my left hand, cut open and bleeding from the glass shards. Anytime. Because of the incident, the others in the room lost all interest in staying and gradually left. These were people who had fought alongside Paul and me from the very beginning. They had seen us at our most in love. They had also watched us go from swearing to grow old together to now wishing we could kill each other. A few of the girls comforted me before leaving. Elena, don't be sad. That pretentious coquette deserved to get hit. Exactly. Her mouth was filthy. If this had been a few years ago, I probably would have been too heartbroken to even speak. Now I just curved my lips into a faint smile. I'm not sad. You didn't have fun tonight. Next time it's on me. Go home. It's not safe for girls to be out too late. Only Oliver, who had always followed Paul and was now the company's vice president, stayed until the end. He had drunk quite a bit. There was contempt in his eyes when he looked at me, and anger too. I raised an eyebrow as he walked over, poured himself a glass of wine, and downed it. Elena, it hasn't been easy for Paul to get where he is today. When men negotiate business outside, a little play acting is unavoidable. You should understand him instead of dragging him down and making things awkward for everyone. Elena, you're too strong. He was standing up for Paul. Hearing that made me want to laugh, and I did. You're getting married next month, right? He looked at me, confused. I continued. I heard your fiancée is the head teacher of a senior graduating class. I've met her before. She practically lives at school. Straightforward, capable, strong-willed. I smiled, but my words were merciless. By your standards, that probably counts as strong. So are you already lining up excuses for cheating before you're even married? He froze for a moment. Then his face darkened. Unreasonable. He left quickly. But I've always held grudges. I had no intention of letting the man who spoke up for Paul off so easily. I called after his retreating back. Cheating openly under the excuse of work and expecting me to understand? If your fiancé knew about your values, do you think you'd still make it to the wedding? Oliver quickened his pace. I poured another glass of wine and drank it in one go. Trash. Chapter 2. By the time I walked out of the hotel, it was already past midnight. After that, I drank quite a bit more on my own. My steps were unsteady. When the wind blew against me, my head cleared a little. I began to think Paul and I were childhood sweethearts. How did we end up like this? Oh, I remember now. It was during a transformation of the company after Paul and I had finally achieved entrepreneurial success. That was the biggest hurdle we had ever faced. During that time, Paul visibly grew haggard. Late at night, he would hold me tightly and say, "Elena, you've suffered following me. I'll succeed. I'll give you a good life." I held him back, burying my head in his chest, clinging to him as I encouraged him. "You will. I believe in you." Back then, Paul didn't know that during that transition, the most important big shot had privately approached me. As long as I spent one night with him, he would help us get through the crisis smoothly. I didn't agree. I've always had a strong sense of morality, and at that time, I loved Paul deeply. I would never do anything to betray him. But precisely because of that, for a long time afterward, whenever I saw Paul exhausted from running around, I would feel an overwhelming sense of guilt. Finally, when the pressure on Paul became so great that he needed sleeping pills just to rest, I took the initiative and called that big shot. All night, I kept smiling, endured the occasional wandering hands, and relied on my strongest professional knowledge and the resilience that had me drinking at the table until I almost vomited blood to win him over. In the end, the company successfully transformed, but that same night, because of excessive drinking, the child we had quietly conceived was gone. Rumors spread throughout the company. They said I had sold my body in exchange for that opportunity. Paul went mad, gripping my neck tightly. "Elena, are you fucking shameless? Why did you go? You didn't believe in me. You didn't believe I could solve it. Why did you go? You're so filthy. How am I supposed to be with you? Why did you make yourself so cheap?" He roared hysterically, his eyes bloodshot, veins bulging. In the end, he pulled me into a crushing embrace and said he was sorry. After that, Paul changed. Chapter 3. When he came home, there would be lipstick stains on his shirt. There would be strands of hair in the folds of his clothes that didn't belong to me. Because of that, I had hysterical breakdowns. I made scenes. I tried desperately to explain what had happened that night. Paul would just look at me calmly and finally say, "Elena, stop being crazy, just like you. I'm only doing it for work." Probably from that moment on, our relationship had already rotted to its roots. After walking a few steps, I felt so dizzy I could barely stand. I kicked off my high heels and simply sat down by the roadside. I took out my phone and dialed a number. The call connected quickly. My tongue felt thick as I spoke. "Come pick me up. I'm at." I thought for a long time but couldn't figure out the address. I giggled twice and said, "I'm waiting for you under the moon." There was the sound of hurried movement on the other end. "Stay there and wait for me," came the reply, and then the call ended. Bored, I tugged at my stockings, which had torn earlier from kicking too hard, leaving a hole that exposed my toes. Before long, a lean figure crouched in front of me. A faint scent of jasmine drifted toward me. The young man picked up my high heels from the side and gently slipped them onto my feet. "You drank so much. Why didn't you call me earlier? What if something happened?" I just stared at him. The alcohol still left my mind sluggish. The young man sighed and turned his back to me. "Get on. I'll take you home." "Oh, okay." I obediently climbed onto his back and let him carry me. "Simon, Simon, I called his name several times. He answered patiently each time. "Do you like me?" I asked. The night wind lifted our hair, and it carried his answer with it. "I do." "That's good. You see, I have money and looks. Why the hell would I lack someone to love me?" With that answer, I rested peacefully against his back. My muddled mind gradually emptied. Standing in the most prosperous area of the city center, directly facing the massive round yellow light on the building across from us, the young man seemed to chuckle. "So it really is the moon." Chapter 4. The next morning, I was woken by a phone call. The hangover made my head feel like it was splitting open. I couldn't remember clearly what had happened the night before. I hurriedly got up, washed up, grabbed my bag, and went out. As soon as I stepped into the police station, I saw the woman from a distance, her face pale. She looked on the verge of tears as she leaned into Paul's arms. There was still gauze wrapped around her head. When she saw me, she shrank further into Paul's embrace as if frightened. Paul only lifted his eyelids to glance at me before lowering his head again, softly coaxing the person in his arms. "MS, Elena. This mess. Rita has brought a medical injury report and filed a complaint. saying you intentionally caused her harm. Please cooperate with the investigation. I nodded and threw my bag onto the table in front of me. Because I used too much force, the metal ornament on the bag slammed onto the table with a loud bang. The police officer beside us frowned. Paul was the first to speak. He turned to the officer and said, "Sorry. She's a lunatic." Then he looked at me, his tone carrying a warning. "Elena, I told you, if this isn't handled properly, I won't let you off." Handled? How? Apologize to the mistress? He probably forgot that over the years, I had followed him from nothing to everything. The ruthlessness I had honed at negotiation tables would never allow me to humiliate myself. Even though at this moment, seeing him accompany his mistress to report me to the police had already made my body tremble with rage, I still gritted my teeth, my eyes red, and smiled. "Officer, may I ask, are there many cases where a wife beats up the mistress and ends up at the police station?" The moment those words fell, Rita's face turned pale. Even the police officer was stunned. Paul finally raised his head and looked at me seriously. I simply smiled back at him, took out a red marriage certificate from my bag, pointed at him, and said to the officer, "Officer, this gentleman is my husband." This young lady interfered in my marriage and verbally insulted me. She deliberately provoked me while I was intoxicated. I admit that hitting her was wrong. "Officer, you can punish me however the law requires. I'll accept it." As soon as I said that, the way several officers looked at Paul and Rita clearly changed. But morality was one thing, assault was still assault. The officer looked at me with a trace of sympathy, his tone softening considerably. "These kinds of disputes are indeed common, but resorting to violence is never advisable. If you can settle this privately, it would be better than letting things escalate." I nodded. The officer then left the space to us. Chapter 5. Elena, apologize to Rita, and this matter can be over. In the empty office, Paul and Rita sat on one side, while I sat alone on the other. "Yes, sis, we didn't come to the police today to hurt you. It's just that you went too far and needed a little lesson." Rita pouted and leaned even closer against Paul. When she looked at me, her eyes were filled with smugness. Looking at her face, caked with so much makeup to fake fragility that it seemed like it would crumble off at a single touch. If this had been before, I would have already slapped her. I sneered and pulled up a document on my phone, handing it to Paul. I watched with satisfaction as the color drained from his face the moment his eyes fell on the contents. "Paul, let's make a deal. We settle this matter, and I delete this file." Smack! The phone was slammed violently onto the table. The casing popped off and grazed my face as it flew past. I didn't move. I stared as Paul suddenly stood up. The indifference and calm from before were gone from his eyes. In their place were panic and pain. Strange. What was he in pain about? "You're threatening me?" he asked in disbelief. "No, you're the one threatening me. Paul, after all these years, you should understand my personality. There's nothing that can threaten me." I tilted my chin slightly upward. "The company is your life's work too. You have shares. If that file gets out, you won't get anything either." Paul's voice cracked from shouting. I merely dug at my ear, still ringing from the noise. "But you care about the company more than I do. The one who has nothing to lose is the strongest. Isn't that right? Paul, can you accept starting all over again? Besides, you're the legal representative of the company. I've long been pushed to the margins, just holding shares, with no access to any of this. Paul, you chose this way to disgust me. If I go in because of your mistress, I guarantee you'll go in too. I might only be detained for a few days and won't even get a record. What about you?" I glanced calmly at Rita, who looked completely clueless. "Now, it's your choice." Paul glared at me, repeating lunatic several times in anger. I kept looking at him, the smile on my face almost stiffening. After a long while, he deflated like a punctured balloon, as if all the spirit had drained from him. His lips trembled. "You win again." When we signed the settlement agreement, Rita was still clinging to Paul's arm, acting coquettish and expressing her dissatisfaction. "Paul, are you really just letting her go? You said you'd teach her a lesson." This time, Paul didn't indulge her. As I walked out of the police station, I immediately saw Simon standing by a car not far away. Paul saw him too. "Oh right. Remember to transfer me the money for the phone." After saying that, I turned to leave, but Paul grabbed my arm. Who is he? Looking at Simon walking toward us, I turned back and smiled at Paul, the college boy I keep. Did you forget? You were the one who said that if I ever felt lonely, I should find someone outside. I listened to you. I watched as Paul froze, his face gradually turning pale. I clicked my tongue, forcefully shook off his hand, and walked away without looking back. Chapter 6. This battle was beautifully won. 15 minutes and it was settled. You're amazing, sis. But is it really okay for him to know those files exist already? When I received the call that morning, I had immediately worked out a countermeasure. Even though the matter was resolved now, I still felt listless. I only tugged lightly at the corner of my lips. Thanks for the compliment. Don't worry, it's fine. Simon pressed his lips together, stayed silent for a moment, then asked, when you came out, what did that bastard say to you? Hearing gentle-natured Simon use a word like that to describe someone made me want to laugh. He asked who you were, and what did you tell him? I choked on my words. Simon was not a college boy I kept. He was simply a student I had once sponsored. He was already a junior now and had opened a gallery with some classmates. He no longer needed my help. I had once learned about his unbearable family background. A father who jumped from a building over gambling debts, a mother who ran away, relentless debt collectors, and a young him who couldn't escape any of it. Only people or things that aren't worth it make you cry. Since they're not worth it, why cry? That was the first sentence Simon ever said to me. Back then, he had just been cornered and beaten by debt collectors at the school gate, his face bruised and swollen. At that time, I had retreated into the role of housewife to please Paul, only for him to push things further outside. I was drowning in severe self-doubt, wandering the streets like a lunatic. We met each other at our lowest points. Sis? I kept silent. He seemed to guess something and smiled, two shallow dimples appearing. You didn't tell him I'm your boyfriend, did you? Wait, you really did? He turned to look at me, his eyes shining. The car jolted sharply because he lost focus for a moment. I smacked him on the head. Don't overthink it. Focus on driving. He muttered something I didn't catch. It sounded like, you were the one who asked me that night if I liked you. Chapter 7. The news of Rita and Paul going to the police spread like wildfire in the company. Paul keeping a mistress wasn't exactly a secret, but making such a public scene was a first. He lost face this time. I heard that a major client who doted on his wife and was about to sign a cooperation contract had backed out because of this incident. Rita had already been suspended and sent home. My phone buzzed several times. It was a few text messages and photos. You barren hen. What right do you have to stay by Paul's side? You should die. Just die. Paul said he lost interest in you a long time ago. Even if you stripped naked in front of him, he wouldn't react. Are you even a woman? Old woman. Paul hasn't touched you in ages. Has he? Feeling empty? I bought you a rolling pin. I'll mail it to you tomorrow. The photos were taken in various places, in various positions. The man's face showed pleasure, his narrow eyes half closed. He clearly hadn't realized he was being secretly photographed. TSK. They were playing quite wildly. I raised an eyebrow, took screenshots one by one, and forwarded them to Paul, adding a complimentary idiot. After finishing the beauty treatment, I dropped by Simon's gallery. The young man pulled me along, telling me the story behind every painting. After an entire afternoon immersed in it, I felt as if I had gained a touch of artistic air myself. When I was leaving, Simon hesitated as if he wanted to say something. In the end, he simply plucked the most fully bloomed jasmine flower from his vase and handed it to me. The flowers I planted in the greenhouse have bloomed. I smiled, took it, and tucked it behind my ear. When I got home, the smell of food was already in the air. There was the sound of stir-frying coming from the kitchen. I frowned, took off my heels, and quietly pulled a baseball bat from the bottom of the shoe cabinet before walking over. Paul, who hadn't been home in a long time, was in the kitchen wearing an apron, busy cooking. Hearing me, he turned and smiled at me, as if the grievances of all these years had never existed. You're back? Wash your hands. Dinner's ready. 3 dishes and 1 soup were laid out on the table, perfectly colored and presented. I felt dazed. When we first got married, we spent every mealtime like this. After eating, we would clean up together. He would wash, and I would mess around beside him, soap bubbles flying everywhere. Later, the dining table was left with only my lonely figure, and phone calls that would never go through. Last New Year's Eve, fireworks bloomed outside the 23rd floor window. I cooked a bowl of dumplings alone and ate them with tears mixed into vinegar. That day, for some reason, I suddenly missed Paul terribly. The call connected. On the other end came the same cold sentence. On a business trip. Before the call ended, a delicate female voice drifted through. Paul, since my parents passed away, no one has spent New Year's Eve with me. Thank you. I hung up in a panic before hearing the rest. Here, have a drumstick. When we were poor, we had to fight for it. Now you can eat as much as you want. Paul interrupted my thoughts, smiling as he placed a chicken drumstick into my bowl. I more or less knew why he was suddenly putting on this act. I silently moved the drumstick aside and took a bite of rice. For once, the dinner table was peaceful. No plates or bowls were smashed. He talked to me for a long time, mostly reminiscing about the past. There was a faint smile at the corner of his mouth, nostalgia on his face. Only when impatience showed on mine did he finally sigh. Elena, how did we end up like this? Chapter 8. The air froze for a moment. We had clearly both thought of those years when the fighting was at its worst. He often wouldn't come home at night, and I would go to the company to make a scene looking for him. When I sensed he was cheating, I hired the most professional detectives to dig up his mistresses. I turned both our social circle and those women's circles upside down. He, in turn, began to indulge those mistresses in humiliating and suppressing me in every possible way. In the end, even the bare minimum of civility between us was gone. Paul would point at my nose and call me a lunatic. After every argument, what remained was a living room in complete wreckage. Lunatic became the word he used most to describe me. I set down my bowl. Paul, when he heard me call his name, he actually seemed nervous. I smiled faintly. We came from the same orphanage. The first thing children in an orphanage learn is how to fight for things. We fought for food, clothes, and for the love of the director and the caretakers. I was the youngest. I couldn't win, so you fought for double. I spoke slowly. In the quiet living room, my voice sounded hollow. Because of you, I was the fairest and healthiest orphan in the orphanage, and you were the one who got beaten the most. I lifted my head, my vision blurred with mist. Wet. We stumbled and scraped our way into adulthood together. Falling in love with him seemed like the most natural thing in the world. Companions in childhood, lovers in youth, married as adults. After so many years, being with him had become a habit, which meant that to leave him, I would have to tear off a layer of flesh. Fortunately, I had been doing exactly that every day for years. By the end, when the pain had numbed, all it would take was one hard pull, and the flesh would finally separate from the bone. Our 7-year marriage had been a 7-year-long farewell. Paul lowered his head, lost in thought. I continued. Paul, do you remember how you used to treat me when we were little? He froze. A faint smile curved at my lips. When you were 10 and learning to use a needle, it was because my little cotton jacket was too thin. I ran a fever for 3 days straight. You cried as you pulled the stuffing out of your own jacket to fill mine. The first fight you ever got into at the orphanage was because the director's nephew snatched my white rabbit candy. At 13, you used all the money you earned collecting bottles to buy a train ticket south. You sat on that train for 13 hours, then brought me back to the orphanage after I'd been adopted and treated badly. You told me not to be afraid, that you'd take me home. You probably never knew how tall and heroic you looked to me back then. With every sentence I spoke, Paul's face grew paler. So tell me, Paul, how did you bring yourself to treat me like this these past few years? I lowered my voice to hide the choke in it. Do you remember what the director said when we decided to get married? Paul opened his mouth but didn't speak. She said we were two stubborn donkeys. I'm stubborn and straightforward. You're stubborn and complicated. If we married, we wouldn't survive 7 years. But this is the 7th year. We're still together, Paul said urgently. So, Paul, let's get divorced. Chapter 9. At the end of that conversation, Paul fled in embarrassment. In the end, he never said what he had come back that day to do. I later confirmed my guess through the girls at the company. Recently, the company has lost several major contracts in a row. They were all deals Elena used to handle. Serves him right. A man who betrays his wife won't keep his wealth. So that must have been what he came back to talk about. After all, climbing up from the bottom had been unbearably hard. In recent years, all he'd heard were flattering boss this and boss that. He hadn't faced this kind of setback in a long time. I stirred the coffee in my cup. You all should start making plans too. Okay. Elena, the evidence materials have all been collected. When will you submit them? Elena, you bitch. Why are you still clinging to Paul? It was Rita. Gone was the fragile little white flower act. At this moment, her expression was almost twisted. She had lost a lot of weight. Up close, there were still red, swollen finger marks on her face. She was being held back by staff not far away. Paul broke up with her and demanded the money he spent on her back. She refused. So, one of the girls leaned close to whisper to me. I understood. That day, I had forwarded the messages and photos she sent me to Paul. Paul, he was sensitive and cold-hearted. Seeing that Rita had secretly taken photos of them in bed would have made him think a lot. Naturally, he wouldn't keep her. When he turned cold, he was more terrifying than anything. I lifted my eyes and signaled the staff to let Rita go and allow her over. I turned to the girls I'd invited out for afternoon tea. Go back to work and remember what I said. They nodded and left. Only then did I look at Rita, who was glaring at me viciously. If you have something to say it quickly. I'm busy. I'm pregnant. I raised an eyebrow. With mine? She gritted her teeth. With Paul's. He wants to break up with me. But why should he? I'm carrying his child. How can he just leave me? Oh, then you should go find him. I stood up, picked up my bag, and prepared to leave. Rita grabbed my arm, venom in her eyes. It must be you. You bitch, you refuse to. Smack! I withdrew my hand after slapping her. I've wanted to hit you for a long time. Also, whoever bullied you, go find them. Coming to me, did you forget the last time I smashed your head? Rita covered her face and glared at me, then burst into tears. What do you know? Someone like me, crawling out of a rotten family, wanting to grab anyone who can change my situation. What's wrong with that? You have no idea what I've suffered. If you choose to be a mistress, then have the awareness of one. There are countless mistresses who never get promoted to wife. Your background doesn't excuse your moral corruption. It's all your own doing. After saying that, I didn't look back at her and strode away. Chapter 10. The company probably really hasn't been doing well lately. After disappearing for a few days, Paul started coming home every day again for the first time in years. Just like when we were newly married, he was attentive to me in every possible way. When he came home, he would bring me a bouquet of jasmine, and once inside, he would immediately start doing housework. I used to think that once I made enough money, I could let you live in the kind of house you see on TV. Later, we got the house, and we moved in, but he didn't finish. A bitter smile curved at his lips. I watched the television. He stared at me. For a while, the goosebumps on my arms refused to go away. I brought up divorce a few more times. He didn't disappear again. He just trembled at the lips and changed the subject. He knew my personality. Once I decided something, I wouldn't change it. And I knew he was avoiding it. I didn't understand it. After all the chaos he had caused over the years, now that I was giving him his freedom, why was he unwilling? But it didn't matter. We would divorce soon enough. After showering, I was sitting at the vanity drying my hair. Suddenly, the towel was taken from my hands. A pair of large hands covered my hair through the towel, meeting Paul's gentle gaze in the mirror. My scalp prickled. A wave of disgust filled my chest. I immediately stood and stepped away. Paul, you don't have to do this. Since I've returned to the household, I won't interfere in company matters anymore. If there's no issue, hurry and sign the divorce agreement. At that, his face went pale. No, that's not why. It's not about the company. He looked at me seriously. Elena, I never once thought about divorcing you. I've broken it off with Rita. I won't get entangled with anyone outside anymore. Let's live properly, okay? There was even a trace of hope in his eyes. For a moment, I almost saw the young boy turning back to smile at me. Elena, Go pick your favorite dress. I'll hold them off for you. That boy's eyes had once been clear and bright. The man in front of me now had eyes clouded by years in the world of power and profit. They were no longer the same person. The last bit of attachment in my heart dissolved. Seeing me silent, he stepped closer. His warm breath brushed against my neck. His gaze darkened, desire swirling in it. Just as his lips were about to touch me, I shoved him away. Paul staggered back a few steps. Hurt, humiliation, and unwillingness flashed across his face. You despise me? His voice trembled. Yes, haven't you always known? I took several deep breaths to suppress the nausea rising inside me. My coldness during this time finally angered this man who had long been used to standing above others. So from the moment you found out I cheated, you never let me touch you again all these years. Even when Rita said you couldn't have children, you didn't care, did you? All these years, those executives who were close to me kept asking why we didn't have a child. What was I supposed to say? That my wife refused to have one with me? The thin veil between husband and wife was torn apart. He shouted, veins bulging at his temples. I lost my temper too and shouted back. Yes, I won't have a child with you. I think you're filthy. I'm afraid even looking at you will give me an infection. Silence filled the air. He looked at me, countless emotions surging in his eyes. Gradually, his eyes reddened and grew moist. With a loud bang, the room was left with only me again. How nice. It was quiet again. I crouched down to pick up the towel he had thrown on the floor. As my hand neared it, I abruptly withdrew it and went to the wardrobe to take out a new one before sitting back down at the vanity. Chapter 11. What I didn't expect was that the first person to seek me out after learning I was divorcing Paul was Oliver. In the cafe, he sat with his legs crossed, clearly having waited for some time. When he saw me, he greeted me indifferently and went straight to the point. Elena, the company is unstable right now. Bringing up divorce with Paul at this time, isn't that a bit heartless? I didn't hold back. Oliver, the matters between my husband and me, why do you always have to stick your nose in? What about your own family affairs? Have you handled those? After the year-end gathering, I had copied the surveillance footage from that private room and anonymously mailed it to his fiancée. Not for anything else. She deserved to hear her future husband's absurd remarks. I heard her parents were already discussing postponing the wedding. It's impressive, his own house is on fire. Yet he still finds time to manage Paul's affairs. Oliver fell silent for a moment, then unexpectedly softened his tone. Elena, Paul did a lot of bad things before, but he's changed now. He drove Rita away. He knows he was wrong. So knowing he was wrong means I have to forgive him? If everything could be forgiven, what would we need the police for? I stood up to leave. I will never forget the harm he's done to me over these years. Just like you've never forgotten that when you first joined the company and lost a client, I insisted on firing you. I always knew Oliver disliked me. Back when I hadn't yet retreated into the household, Oliver had secured an order and, in order to strengthen ties with the client, acted as a pimp to please him even knowing the man had a wife. The client's wife found out, beat up the mistress, and the finalized deal was lost. At the time, I saw through his crooked character and prepared to compensate him properly and let him go. It was Paul who kept him. Oliver's lips moved slightly, then he lowered his head and said nothing more. That evening, I ate out with Simon and his gallery classmates. Young people are full of energy. After dinner, they wanted to go to a nearby basketball court to play. Sis, want to try? Simon reached out a hand to me, a faint smile on his fair face. The other boys and girls who came with us smiled at me too. At that moment, my heart was peaceful. In an instant, the heaviness that had weighed on me all this time dissipated. I kicked off my heels and ran over. By the time we finished playing, it was almost 11. Everyone gradually left. Simon stayed until the end, waiting for me to change and taking me home. After coming out of the locker room, I habitually checked my phone. I unlocked it, and when I saw one of the messages, my pupils shrank sharply. What's wrong? Simon immediately sensed something was off. I didn't answer. I rushed outside, ready to hail a car. A black car stopped in front of me, the window rolling down. Simon said, "Sis, get in. I'll take you." Chapter 12. By the time we returned to the orphanage, it was already 5 in the morning the next day. Simon had driven all night. I found a place for him to rest. As I stood at the gate knocking, my heart pounded fiercely. The message had been sent by the oldest child currently in the orphanage. It said the director had suddenly fallen ill and couldn't get out of bed, asking me to come back and see her. Back then, in the orphanage, the director wasn't especially kind to us. But after I was abused by my adoptive family and Paul brought me back, she handled the aftermath. She let me stay at the orphanage. She allowed me to live steadily until I graduated from university. After knocking for a while, lights came on inside. The gate opened quickly. I rushed in and headed straight to the director's room. Just as I entered, I saw the middle-aged woman rubbing her messy hair, muttering, "Who's knocking at this hour?" I stopped. When she saw me, her eyes lit up. "Elena, why are you back so early? It's a long way from the capital to here. Weren't you too sick to get out of bed?" I pulled my arm from her grasp, my voice cool. "Why did you lie to get me back?" She touched her nose guiltily. "Aw, since you're already here, come, get some sleep first. We'll talk tomorrow." She tried to pull me toward her bed. Forget it. There was only one reason she would look for me: money. After hours in the car, I was tired too, so I let her pull me down to rest. When I woke up again, it was already 2 in the afternoon. I sent Simon a message asking him to come pick me up. Then I went to see the director. She had grown old. There was more and more white in her hair. The moment she heard my footsteps, she began reminiscing. "You know, when you first came here, you were just a baby. Back then there were too many orphans and too few adults. Who had time to care for you? It was Paul, still a child himself, who looked after you. You know, that boy Paul. He seemed to have chosen you since he was little, guarded you like a puppy, and when you wet the bed as a child, it was that boy who washed your sheets and clothes." She chuckled. "You only recognized him too. Such a tiny thing, but only he could calm you when you cried. How much did he give you?" I interrupted her lightly. She froze for a moment, then looked up and smiled. 500,000. I nodded. 1 million. I'll transfer it immediately. Stay out of our affairs from now on. After saying that, I turned to leave. Just before I reached the door, her voice rang out again. "Elena, it's not just about money. I want you to be happy. You two have grown up together. He's trying so hard to win you back now. In the future, he'll make you happy. It's long been used up. That affection. It was used up when I couldn't accept his betrayal. When I lay awake night after night, my hair falling out in clumps. When I was called lunatic over and over again. If I hadn't endured that suppression and psychological manipulation, perhaps by now, I really would have become one." Chapter 13. When I walked out, Paul was indeed standing not far away. In just a short time, he had lost a lot of weight. His face was gaunt, his chin covered with dark stubble. Despair filled his eyes. Yet he still lifted his face and smiled at me. "It's been a long time since we've come back. Can we take a walk together?" I agreed. In truth, there was nothing left for us to say. Over the years, we had said everything that could possibly be said. Good words, crazy words, basketfuls of them. All it did was drain me. There were only a few very young children in the yard. The older ones had gone to school. With the monthly support from Paul and me, the orphanage was in much better condition now. Many places had been renovated. The children were well fed and clothed. Their faces carried the innocence of childhood. Back then we didn't have enough to eat or wear. We fought until our heads were bleeding over scraps. And no one cared. "They're so lucky now." Nostalgia showed on Paul's face. I didn't respond. What he was reminiscing about, I had spent 7 years slowly detaching from it. Those images had long since faded in my memory. They felt like scenes from a past life. His voice was hoarse. He must have been smoking heavily. Actually, there were 2 times families wanted to adopt me. In the end, I didn't go. I kept thinking, if I left, I might never see you again in this lifetime. I absent-mindedly stroked the head of a little girl who had come close, listening without interest. Suddenly, I realized how ridiculous it had been when I once tried to use these memories to win him back. He must have listened back then with the same impatience I felt now. Paul's gaze never left me. "Is there really no chance? Even for the sake of our childhood?" "Elena, I've done a lot of wrong things, but I'm human. Humans make mistakes. There will never be anyone closer to us than each other. I've reflected during this time. I really can't live without you. Why won't you try to accept my repentance? By the end, his voice was choking with emotion. Humans do make mistakes, but Paul, not every mistake deserves forgiveness. I said calmly, "You're right, there won't be anyone closer to us in this world. But so what? When you raised the knife against me, your hand didn't tremble, Paul. Let's leave it at that. Don't try to bind me with our past, just like you didn't turn back because of it. Neither will I." I finished coldly. The sound of a car came from outside the orphanage. The moment I turned around, Paul dropped to his knees with a heavy thud. His voice was filled with endless sorrow. No. I didn't want it to be like that back then. At that time, He seemed unable to continue. Of course, I had no interest in hearing what he was about to say. Chapter 14. Paul agreed to the divorce. His only condition was to spend one last New Year's Eve with me. After the company went on holiday, he began preparing for it far in advance. I sat on the sofa eating chips, watching him move back and forth around the house, putting up Red Spring Festival couplets and paper cuttings on the windows. Today Paul wasn't wearing a suit. He had on a sweater I'd knitted for him when I withdrew from the company and was bored at home. He looked just like before, a man in his 30s who didn't seem older, only steadier with age. He kept finding excuses to talk to me, trying to use it to awaken the love I once had for him. "Elena, is it crooked?" he called out to me with a smile. I rolled my eyes and went into the guest room, not looking at the way his eyes dimmed. Finally, New Year's Eve arrived. Paul got up early and busied himself. He wore a bright red sweater today and had even picked out red clothes for me. I wore them. He was very happy. We had to make a lot of dumplings. Paul prepared the filling while I stood beside him making trouble. No, idiot! How can you put vinegar inside? It won't taste good. Salt. Too much salt. For heaven's sake, what did you do to the dough? How am I supposed to wrap anything like this? Paul spread his hands helplessly. Though he complained, his eyes were bright. Because when our relationship was good, every New Year's Eve was spent like this. He untied his apron. "Forget it. We'll use this dough for soup. Stay home and behave. I'll go downstairs to buy dumpling wrappers." As he walked out, he suddenly stopped, strode back, wrapped an arm around my waist, and tried to kiss me. I smiled and turned my face slightly. His movement froze. In the end, he rubbed my head gently. "Wait for me. I'll be right back." "Okay," I replied softly. With my response, happiness spread across his face before he turned away. I stared at his retreating figure. Slowly, my vision blurred, until that patch of red disappeared completely. In my heart, I whispered, "Goodbye forever, Paul." Chapter 15. Not long after Paul left, the doorbell rang. Several girls burst in chatting noisily, carrying bags of groceries and snacks. "Hey, won't anyone help me carry this? Quick, quick. The door's open. Elena, we're here to spend New Year's with you." I stepped aside to let them in. As soon as they entered, they divided up tasks and started bustling around. Then the sound of sirens approached from afar. I opened the balcony door. Paul stood downstairs, 2 bags in his hands. 2 police officers were striding toward him, showing their badges, as if sensing my gaze. Paul suddenly looked up. There were too many emotions in that one glance. "Elena, let's make dumplings." "Coming." I raised a hand to wipe the moisture from the corner of my eyes and walked away from the balcony. They raised their glasses in a toast to Elena for climbing out of the mire. Happy New Year! Chapter 16. Paul was arrested. He was charged with illegal bid rigging, tax evasion, and substituting inferior materials that resulted in loss of life. These were the documents I showed Paul at the police station when Rita reported me. All of those files had been gathered by the girls I had quietly promoted back when I was still in the company. They were positioned across different departments. Together, they formed no small force. From the moment Paul found out about the evidence of his infidelity, he began replacing the people I had left in the company, along with those who initially spoke up for me. Within half a year, the company underwent a complete overhaul. That was when I realized, when navigating the world, It's not only your rivals you must guard against, it's also the people around you. Even afterward, some still came to me indignantly about the company and about Paul. All I could tell them was to focus on their work and stop saying anything else. On the surface, I no longer had a single reliable person in the company. But if he could have Oliver, how could I possibly have no one of my own? There was one thing he had said that wasn't wrong. He said I was a lunatic. I said the one who doesn't care is the strongest. Later, I stopped caring about him. I stopped caring about the company's development. After surviving 7 years of pain that felt like flesh being torn from bone, after completely stripping away my feelings for Paul, I felt nothing for him anymore. I am someone who can take and let go. When I loved, I gave him everything. When I hate, I hold grudges just as deeply. Paul's sentence was handed down 6 months later. 10 years. Oliver had been involved as well. So he went in too. His wedding with his fiancée never took place. How nice. I saved a girl. I had my lawyer send over the divorce agreement. This time, Paul signed it without hesitation. The lawyer said he wanted to see me. I refused. That night, I had a dream. In the dream, it was the winter of our 2nd year of high school. I had been accidentally locked inside the equipment room by a classmate. That winter, the snow was especially heavy. It reached past my calves. As the sky darkened, the school grew quiet. I cried nonstop in the freezing equipment room. Suddenly, the window glass shattered from outside. Young Paul appeared outside the window, panting. The fear on his face only eased when he saw I was unharmed. I never knew how many places he searched that day or how long he had looked for me. I only remember that from his calves down, his pants were soaked through. His lean legs were frozen nearly black. After that, every winter his legs would ache. I threw myself into his arms and cried for a long time. Only when he carried me out of the school did I ask in a muffled voice, "Paul, how did you know to come? You didn't go home." "I knew something must have happened, so I came to your school to look for you." "What if you couldn't find me?" "Then I'd keep looking. I'd always find you." At the end of the dream, young Paul stood at the entrance of the orphanage, waving at me. I knew he was saying goodbye. It was precisely because I had once loved him that deeply that his betrayal became impossible to forgive. Chapter 17. After Paul went to prison, I sold my shares to the other shareholders. I transferred that sum in one payment into the director's account. Oliver wasn't wrong. I am strong-willed, and I can't stay idle. So after resting for half a year, I decided to return to the workplace. I registered a small company with 12 employees and, together with my girls, we busied ourselves every day. The day after my divorce, Simon confessed to me and began following me around daily. When others asked him, he would smile gently and say, "Yes, I'm pursuing my sister." He always maintained boundaries that made people comfortable, quietly weaving himself into every aspect of my life. It wasn't that I didn't notice, but he handled it well. Not only did he not make me uncomfortable, he made many things easier. During the early days of the company, when we were extremely busy, he would silently stay by my side, learning and helping. I found it amusing and asked him, "Don't you think I'm too strong?" Paul used to say that often. He continued flipping through documents. "It's not strong." "What?" I paused. He looked up at me steadily. "It's not strong. It's excellence. You're so excellent." That he felt insecure, afraid he wasn't worthy of you. That's why he suppressed you, manipulated you. Everything he did was to tame you, until you completely submitted and couldn't leave him. Once your bottom line disappeared, he could control you entirely. I won't do that. I'll become just as excellent as you, so I can deserve you. I looked out the window. So that's what it was. After the company stabilized, Simon suddenly withdrew his shares from the gallery and decided to study abroad. When I asked why, he only said, "When I said I'd become as excellent as you, I meant it. Right now I'm just an art student. An art student can't stand beside you." He enrolled in a reputable comprehensive university abroad and switched to finance. He was gone for 3 years, though he often came back during that time, and I frequently flew abroad. Whenever he was by my side, he took meticulous care of me. After he left, I inevitably felt unaccustomed to it. This year, I turned 31. 3 months ago, I flew abroad to see Simon, and we slept together. At the same time, I accepted his pursuit. Now, my period has been absent for 2 months. This morning, I used a test strip. As expected, 2 lines. Just as I was thinking about how to handle this, my phone in my pocket buzzed. It was a message. I'm waiting for you under the moon. Paul, extra story. Chapter 1. I love Elena. She's beautiful, lively. She always carries the vibrant vitality of a sunflower. In that orphanage where the children matured too early, she was the only one who smiled foolishly all day long. Many people loved her. I was just the most insignificant among them. From childhood to adulthood, she was never short of close friends or classmates. In contrast, I was gloomy and quiet. Whether in the orphanage or at school, I was always pushed to the margins. If not for the bond of growing up together, I probably would never have been able to stand by her side. From a distance, I watched the girl holding a bouquet of jasmine among her classmates, lost in thought, until she noticed I hadn't caught up and turned around, smiling as she called out to me, Paul G.E. Hurry up! We have so much homework today. Only then did I run toward her. Coming, in this life, I have 3 greatest regrets. The first was after we graduated from university. I secretly knelt before the director for a long time. In the end, on the condition that I would donate $100,000 every year after I started working, I obtained Elena's documents from her and married her. Because at that time, a boy with excellent conditions was pursuing her among her classmates. I had seen that boy, good-looking, gentle, modest, carrying the calm confidence of someone from a wealthy family. He was the kind of sunlight that children raised long in the dimness of an orphanage would fall for. They looked perfectly harmonious standing together. I panicked. I didn't want to lose her, so I despicably used our lifelong bond to tie her down. Elena, I don't know how to live without you. My voice was hoarse. I lowered my head, not daring to look at her. I knew my behavior was shameless, but I couldn't watch her walk towards someone else. She simply cried, then smiled brilliantly and threw herself into my arms. Paul, we will never, ever be separated. In the end, she became the nourishment of our marriage. For many years afterward, I wondered, if she had chosen that boy, would she have suffered so much later? Chapter 2. The second thing was taking Elena to Chuan City. In 2008, the earthquake struck Chuan City. At that time, Elena and I had just arrived. We were both working day and night, just to afford next month's rent. So when the earthquake hit, we were at our respective workplaces. I ran out like a madman, trying to find her. Those were the hardest days of my life. For an entire week, we were out of contact. All around me were cries of grief. In that state, I searched everywhere for her, ignoring the constant threat of aftershocks. At the collapsed supermarket where she worked, I clawed at the rubble until my hands were covered in blood. The terror of losing her twisted me into something barely human. Just when I raised a knife toward my wrist in despair, she came home, clothes torn and filthy. She threw herself into my arms in fear and handed me a bank card. There was 3 million yuan inside. It was given to her by the supermarket owner who had been buried and rescued alongside her. Unfortunately, the old woman did not survive the week. Fortunately, my Elena was unhurt. The elderly woman was a military widow, childless. After her husband died, she lived off that small supermarket. She had no family. For that week, Elena stayed by her side without rest, caring for her. Before she passed away, she left all the money to Elena. We held each other, laughing and crying. When we calmed down, she said, Paul, we'll never have to worry about paying rent again. My body stiffened. I lowered my head. An indescribable emotion rose within me. Soon after, we went to the capital. That 3 million became our startup fund. Gradually, we gained money, but our love began to deteriorate. Later, I often thought, if I hadn't taken Elena to Chuan City, we wouldn't have had that 3 million as starting capital. We might have become the most ordinary working couple. 9 to 5. Ordinary days filled with the warmth of everyday life. Our greatest wish might have been to buy a small apartment of our own. We would quarrel occasionally, but reconcile over a shared meal or while washing dishes together. Chapter 3. The third thing was the first time I cheated at a gathering with business partners. We were all drunk that night. At some point, a girl appeared beside me. She still carried a stiffness about her. Her youthful face was full of confusion and unease. Paul, new college student, have a taste. When I looked into her dark eyes, I suddenly thought of Elena. Her eyes were very much like Elena's when she was young. Only now, after being tempered by society, Elena's innocence had long faded. In its place was a gaze that was firm and sharp. When I woke up, the girl was still lying in my arms, her body covered in marks. I flew into a rage. I grabbed her by the throat and nearly hysterically threatened her. If anyone finds out, I'll kill you. From now on, pretend you don't know me when you see me. Her face twisted in terror as she nodded. I threw all the cash from my wallet at her and left quickly. For a long time after that, I felt uneasy whenever I faced Elena. I became her shadow, following her around all day. Elena narrowed her eyes and smiled. How rare. Not busy these days? Why are you following me all the time? I buried my face in her neck to hide my guilt. Even if I'm busy, I still have to follow you. She giggled and pushed me away. Stop it. That tickles. You may not be busy, but I am. Yes. By then, Elena was no longer the little girl trailing behind me. She was the company's leader. Her ability, her connections, her foresight and decisiveness were far above mine. The only thing that hadn't changed was that she was still surrounded by many outstanding people who admired her. There were women, and there were men. Chapter 4. Hey, have you heard? They say the young heir of Hangye is pursuing Elena. She's beautiful and capable. They'd be a power couple. I heard the company's initial capital came from Elena risking her life. I don't know what she saw in her husband. Shoo, keep your voice down. The whispers reached my ears. A partner shook my hand with a look of amused mockery. I forced a smile and saw him out. When I turned back, I lowered my eyes. It wasn't the first time I'd heard those words. At first, I would proudly hold Elena and ruffle her hair. Our Elena is amazing. Later, I suddenly realized that the distance I had barely managed to close with a marriage certificate after graduation was growing again. And this time, I had no way to stop it. It was the helplessness of watching her walk farther and higher while I remained where I was. So many times, I could only watch her back as she moved effortlessly among those people. But this time, she wouldn't stop and turn around to wait for me like she had in our youth. Suddenly, I understood that strange feeling I'd had when we received the 1.3 million and she said we would never have to worry about rent again. I had never truly made peace with the gap between us. Slowly, I even began to resent her. I didn't want to face how radiant she was. Later, at another business event, I saw the girl from that night again. A middle-aged man was forcibly dragging her into a corner. Seeing that face, so similar to Elena's in her youth, I stepped in and saved her. I found her an apartment outside. And from then on, I could no longer stop myself. Chapter 5. Elena is very smart. She was able to accurately sense the problem between us. And then she made a concession I never expected. All right, the company has stabilized now. It's time for me to properly be your wife. She laughed sweetly, wrapped her arms around mine, and kissed my surprised face. What? You don't want that? The surge of joy almost burst through my head. I lifted her and spun her around several times. Then, eyes reddened, pressed a heavy kiss to her lips. Elena, thank you. I thought that from then on, life would be smooth, just as I had imagined. If not for that message. Paul, are you coming tonight? I had almost forgotten about the woman I was still keeping outside. In my panic, my phone fell to the ground. A hand picked it up faster than I could. Elena tilted her head slightly, frowning. What's wrong? I forced a smile and quickly snatched the phone back. Nothing. Something came up at the company. I need to step out. Elena stood up, fetched my coat, and walked me to the door. As I left, I looked at her steadily. The guilt in my heart nearly overflowed. In the end, I said hoarsely, I'll come back early tonight to keep you company. She looked happy. Okay, go on. I quickly cut off everything with that woman, and then began despising myself. Why did I betray Elena? How could I betray Elena? She was the person I had loved since childhood. But before I could dwell on it further, the company ran into trouble. The only solution was transformation. During that time, I did everything I could. I truly tried. Yet all my efforts for so long were no match for one night from Elena. I stayed up until my eyes were bloodshot. But she resolved everything with a single dinner. Once again, I faced those contemptuous looks. They would say again that I wasn't worthy of Elena. A sharp twang. I felt the string in my mind called reason snap completely. Chapter 6. I stopped refusing the women sent my way in the world of fame and profit. Taking advantage of the rumors spreading through the company that Elena had traded her body for the success of the company's transformation, I accepted them all. That was the first time I saw Elena completely hysterical, and the room wrecked in ruins. After the chaos, she clutched me tightly and cried, "I didn't do it. Paul, you know me. I would never do something like that." Yes, I knew her. She earned that success with her own ability. Yet in that moment, watching her cry in pain because she loved me, an unspeakable sense of pleasure rose in my heart. I thought, I must be sick. After that, I lived through the most absurd period of my life. Elena, once the calm and self-possessed boss, became one of countless women trapped in marriage, unable to escape. With the word lunatic, I stripped away the halo she once had. I used suppression to watch her love me in pain. Love only me, and nothing else. I watched her eyes turn from vibrant to lifeless. But by then, I was already blinded by the flattery around me and the endless stream of women, gradually losing myself in the neon lights. Some friends who had grown up with us tried to advise me, "Paul, stop while you can. Don't end up completely alone." I scoffed. Would that happen? No. Elena loved me too much. In all of Beijing, no. In the entire world, Elena had only me as her family. There were still old employees in the company who supported Elena and spat at me behind my back. Disgusting. Built his fortune on his wife and ends up this heartless. Whenever I heard such talk, I fired the person who spread it. Soon, no one in the company dared to speak anymore. But I forgot one thing. How stubborn Elena truly was. She never tolerated sand in her eyes. When I came home after having my fun and tried to hold her, wanting intimacy, only for her to coldly push me away, I suddenly realized that since the day she discovered my affair, she had never allowed me to touch her again. Paul, if you're in heat, go find a prostitute. Don't act crazy here. Her expression was calm, her eyes holding faint disdain and disgust. Disgust. How could Elena possibly be disgusted by me? I mocked myself with that thought. Yet when Elena pulled out the documents at the police station, the ones enough to send me to prison, I finally woke up from the dream. My heart was suddenly flooded with panic. But everything was already too late. Chapter 7. The day I was arrested was New Year's Eve. Heavy snow fell over Beijing. In truth, I hadn't spent New Year's Eve with Elena for several years. Before we were married, I used to dream of spending New Year's Eve with her, just the two of us in a warm room, eating the reunion dinner, holding her while watching the gala. Then, when the clock struck midnight, lighting sparklers with her on the balcony and kissing her at 0 hour, I thought of last year's New Year's Eve, when she suddenly called me, her voice trembling as she asked whether I was coming home for dinner. What was I doing then? Oh right, I had taken a new woman to the Maldives. That woman said she had no family and wanted to spend New Year's Eve with me. Why didn't I remember then that Elena was also alone? I was the one who had protected her. Little by little, as she grew up, my eyes burned. My heart felt like it was being cut by knives. I went to the supermarket and bought a lot of dumpling wrappers, but at the entrance of the residential complex, I saw police cars. The moment the police walked toward me, clarity struck me out of nowhere. I looked up toward the floor where we lived. Elena was standing quietly on the balcony, looking down at me, though she said nothing. I already understood everything. I gently set the plastic bags down on the ground and stretched out my hands, letting the police restrain me. Only before leaving, I turned my head back once more. There was no longer anyone on the balcony. Chapter 8. For multiple offenses combined, I was sentenced to 10 years. 6 months after I went in, Elena's lawyer brought the divorce agreement again. This time, I signed it. I also asked her to pass along a message that I wanted to see Elena once. She didn't come. She was more resolute than I had imagined. For the next 10 years, she never visited. And honestly, if I were in her position, I wouldn't want to see the other person either. I had never wanted to admit it. But all these years since I'd known Elena, I had always been sensitive and inferior in front of her. I cared that the company's starting capital was that $3 million. I cared about what people said, that she was outstanding and I wasn't worthy of her. In the end, that inferiority burned through the feelings we had built since childhood. Only later did I realize the bone-deep pain. Pain so intense I couldn't sleep night after night. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw Elena, tears in her eyes, accusing me. Paul, how did we become like this? Paul, if you couldn't treat me well, why did you marry me? You knew I had better choices back then. When I woke up, I gasped for air, clutching my chest, unable to straighten up. Chapter 9. Oliver had been involved in those matters too. He came in as well, though his sentence was shorter than mine. After he got out, he came to see me. The once high-spirited man was now unshaven and disheveled. Because of all this, he never got married. They were only days away from the wedding, just waiting for the civil affairs office to open so they could register. Paul, I went to see her. She's married now. Has a child. I didn't dare appear in front of her. So that's what she looks like as a mother. If I hadn't made that mistake, she would have been my wife. When sister-in-law scolded me back then, I refused to listen. Now this is karma. Oliver gave a bitter smile. I couldn't speak. In the end, I only moved my lips. Since you're out, forget it. Live well from now on. But I can't forget her. Paul, I can't. A man over 6 feet tall covered his face, tears seeping through his fingers. Before he left, Oliver's eyes were red. He looked at me for a long time before saying, Paul, sister-in-law has remarried too. You. I didn't hear the rest. I only saw his lips moving. He gave me a worried look and left. I covered my mouth and stayed silent for a long time, until finally I broke down and cried. Chapter 10. After I was released, I secretly went to see Elena. I finally understood why Oliver didn't dare appear before his former fiancée. I didn't dare appear before Elena either. I was like a rat hiding in the gutter, watching her from afar. She was still as young as ever, perhaps even more radiant than before, wearing a white dress, holding a bouquet of jasmine, leading a golden retriever on a leash. The man beside her held her hand, a little girl sitting on his shoulders. The man looked familiar. I remembered he had once been the college student Elena kept. The little girl said something, and the man suddenly leaned over and kissed Elena on the cheek. The whole family burst into laughter. So this was how Oliver must have felt seeing his former fiancée as a mother. How wonderful. After our failed marriage, she still had the ability to love. She had embraced her new life. I turned around and walked in the opposite direction. I thought this was probably the last time I would ever see her. In truth, I still owed her an apology, but I had no face to appear before her, and she probably didn't need it anymore. I returned to the home we once shared. Dust covered everything. No one had lived there for a long time. Looking at the familiar furnishings, I saw in my mind Elena running toward me with a smile. I opened my arms. My body fell backward uncontrollably, and at the very end, I heard the clear voice of a young girl. Paul, once we get married, we'll have a home, right? Our home. No, 3 people. We'll have a baby. Oh, and we should have a dog too.